Melissa looked at my empty wallet, laughed and said, "Love doesn't pay bills, Jason, and neither do your pathetic dreams." Our tiny apartment kitchen smelled like burnt toast and cheap coffee that night, but all I remembered was the look on Melissa's face. The single yellow bulb above the table made everything feel sick and tired, from the peeling paint to the pile of unpaid bills spread out like a crime scene. Melissa stood by the counter with her arms crossed tight over her chest, her lips pressed in a thin, hard line as she stared down at those bills. There was no sadness in her brown eyes, no guilt, just something worse. Disappointment, like she was a teacher and I was a student who failed the easiest test in the world. "You're always dreaming, Jason," she said, each word sharp and cold, bouncing off the cracked tile. "But dreams don't pay rent." I swallowed hard and tried to steady my voice, my fingers tracing the edge of a final notice. "I'm close, Mel. The business is almost there. I just need a little more time," I said, but even I could hear the tired hope in my voice. The fridge hummed louder than normal, like it wanted to join the argument, while the streetlight outside threw a long orange stripe across the floor. Melissa shook her head slowly, her silver earrings catching the light, and let out a sharp breath through her nose. "You've been saying that for a year," she replied, not even looking at me now, just at the overdue electric bill under her fingertips. "You stay up all night on that stupid laptop talking about clients that never pay, deals that never close. I'm tired of living like this." My chest felt tight as I stepped closer, my socks sliding on the worn linoleum, my hand half raised like I could somehow hold on to her with just a gesture. "I'm building something real," I insisted, my voice cracking a little. "This marketing agency can work. I've got meetings set up. Once they land, things will change for us, I swear." She finally looked up then, but her eyes were already far away from me. Melissa's suitcase sat by the door, half-zipped, a folded red dress peeking out like a secret she wasn't hiding anymore. The ticking wall clock above our tiny table suddenly sounded too loud, marking the end of something I still wanted to save. "I can't do this hope thing with you anymore," she said quietly, but her voice had a hard edge. "I want a real future, Jason. Not just your big speeches and late-night plans." I reached for her hand, but she pulled it back before I even touched her. "We are a real future," I said desperately. "I'm not lazy, Mel. You know how hard I work. I'm so close to making this business take off." She picked up her purse and slung it over her shoulder like she had practiced the motion 100 times. "Maybe," she said, her eyes flicking once to the laptop on the table, its cracked screen glowing with an unfinished proposal. "But I can't keep betting on maybe, while the rent is due every month." When she walked to the door, every step echoed in that small space, bouncing off the bare walls that once held our photos. I stared at the dent on the fridge where we had once stuck movie tickets, now just a blank white square, and felt something hollow open up inside me. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice soft, almost childlike even though I tried to sound calm. "You're leaving because I'm not there yet?" She paused with her hand on the doorknob and glanced back at the bills spread across the table, like they were a final answer. "I'm leaving because I don't think you'll ever get there," she said, each word slow and steady. "You're a good guy, Jason, but good isn't enough. Some people talk about ambition. Others actually have it." The words hit harder than any slap. I watched her open the door, the hallway light spilling into our dark apartment, and I wanted to shout, to beg, to promise more. But nothing came out as she walked away. The door clicked shut with a soft, final sound that felt louder than a slammed door, and suddenly the apartment seemed too big and too empty. I stood there staring at the dull brown wood a long time, half expecting it to open again and for her to say she changed her mind. The only thing I heard was the faint traffic noise from the street 3 floors below and the soft buzz of my old laptop still running on the table. When I finally moved, my legs felt heavy like I had walked through wet concrete, and I sank into the crooked chair by the bills. I picked up one envelope, then another, the red words, "Past due," shouting up at me from every corner. I rubbed my eyes with the heels of my hands and laughed once, a dry, bitter sound that didn't feel like it came from me. "You'll never get there," I whispered to myself, repeating her words as if saying them out loud would make them hurt less. They didn't. 1 week later, I came back to the apartment after trying to pitch my services to a small local gym, my feet aching in worn-out sneakers, and the place felt even more like a stranger's home. The framed photo of us at the beach was gone from the shelf, a faint rectangle of dust marking where it used to sit. Her floral mug was missing from the sink. Only my chipped black one remained, sitting lonely beside a rusty spoon. The closet door in the bedroom hung half open, showing an empty row of hangers where her dresses once lived. I stared at the space and tried to remember if her favorite blue dress had moved the last time I checked, as if any detail might prove that this was not permanent. but every trace of her was fading fast, like water drying on glass. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, and a heavy silence filled the room. "You did the smart thing," I muttered, not sure if I believed it, not sure if I wanted to. 2 months after she left, I was lying on that same bed late at night, the glow of my cracked phone screen lighting my face while the city murmured outside. I should have been sleeping, but instead I scrolled through social media like a bad habit I couldn't break. That was when I saw the first photo. Melissa stood next to a tall man in a crisp navy suit, his arm wrapped around her waist, the black Mercedes behind them gleaming under the lights of some fancy restaurant. She wore that red dress that once sat half-zipped by our door, and her smile was wider and brighter than I had seen in months. The caption read, "Some people talk about ambition. Others actually have it." My thumb froze over the screen. I read the line again and again as a slow, sharp pain spread across my chest, making it hard to breathe. I knew that post was meant for me. She didn't have to tag me, the message was clear. I clicked on her profile and saw more pieces of the new life she had chosen, each one like a small cut. Melissa laughing on a rooftop with glowing city lights behind her, the same skyline I saw from my grimy window but from a much higher angle. Melissa holding a glass of champagne on a white sand beach, the ocean bright blue and endless, while I could almost feel the rough texture of my second-hand bedsheets under my fingers. There were photos of her boyfriend's Mercedes, of steak dinners and designer bags, of her in sunglasses leaning back on some boat. I read every caption. Finally living the life I deserve. So grateful for a man who actually knows where he's going. Choose partners who match your ambition. I tossed the phone onto the mattress beside me and stared at the cracked ceiling, my eyes burning. Maybe she was right, I whispered to the quiet room. Maybe I really am just a dreamer who never gets anywhere. The following months blurred into one long gray stretch of days and nights that all looked the same. I woke up to the weak light slipping through the cheap blinds, sat at the wobbly kitchen table with my battered laptop, and sent out emails to potential clients who almost never replied. My small marketing business, which I once bragged about to Melissa, was falling apart piece by piece. A few clients I had managed to get stopped responding, invoices went unpaid, and my savings shrank until my bank app made my stomach twist every time I opened it. Friends who once cheered me on grew quiet. The group chat went from constant noise to a single happy birthday message once a year. When my mom called, her voice was warm but tired. "Maybe it's time to be realistic, Jason," she said gently. "You can always do this business thing on the side. Get a normal job first. Just until you're stable." I agreed out loud, but inside, the words scraped against that stubborn piece of me that still refused to give in. There were nights I sat alone in the dark living room, too drained to even turn on the TV, slurping instant noodles from a plastic bowl while the heat struggled to reach the third floor. The glow from the streetlight painted a pale square on the wall, and my shadow looked small and tired inside it. I would catch myself wondering what Melissa was doing at that exact moment. Maybe she was sitting in some fancy restaurant, laughing over dessert while a waiter refilled her wine. Maybe she was flying to another beach, posting photos of her toes in white sand with some clever caption about success. My chest would tighten with a mix of anger and shame, and I hated that I still checked her profile even after I promised myself I wouldn't. "She was the smartest one," I said one night, my voice flat and empty. She saw I wasn't going to make it and got off the sinking ship. The thought sat heavy on my tongue, bitter and cold, but I couldn't spit it out. So I kept eating my noodles in silence. Yet even in those lowest weeks, something inside me refused to fully die, like a small flame hiding in the ashes. On nights when sleep wouldn't come, and there were many, I opened my laptop not to scroll this time but to learn. I watched free videos about marketing, read blog posts on sales, listened to podcasts from people who had built companies from nothing. The blue light burned my eyes, but I kept taking notes in an old notebook, the pages filling with messy handwriting, arrows and underlined phrases. Value first. Solve real problems. Consistency matters more than motivation. The words started to stack up in my mind, forming a new shape. I couldn't afford courses, so I became my own teacher, pausing and rewinding cheap videos like they were gold. "If I ever get out of this," I muttered, tapping my pen against the page, "it'll be because I climbed every inch myself." Saying it out loud didn't make the pain go away, but it gave it a purpose, like adding weight to a bar I planned to lift one day. Days began to take on a new rhythm, strange but steady. I would wake up, make a cup of bitter black coffee, and sit at my scarred kitchen table with my notebook open. Instead of just cold pitching random businesses, I started to study them. I picked local shops with weak online presence, watched how they posted, checked their websites, and wrote down everything they were doing wrong. Then I drafted simple, clear emails offering to fix those exact problems for free at first, only asking to be paid if they were happy with the result. My first reply in weeks came from a tired-sounding gym owner who wrote, "Sure, kid. If you really think you can help, I'll hear you out." I went to that small gym the next day, the smell of sweat and rubber mats thick in the air, and sat with the owner on a cracked leather bench. "I don't have much to lose," he told me, rubbing his beard. "But I'm not paying up front." My heart pounded. "You don't have to," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "Let me prove myself first." I spent the next 2 weeks living on instant coffee and adrenaline, building a simple ad campaign for his gym from my kitchen table. My laptop fan whirred like it was going to take off as I edited videos, wrote copy, and tested different headlines based on all the things I'd learned at 3 in the morning. I tracked every click, every sign-up, and sent him daily updates. The first time he called me instead of emailing, I panicked, thinking something had gone wrong. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice loud over the line. "My phone has been ringing non-stop with new people wanting free trials." My stomach flipped. "Is that good?" I asked, half joking, half afraid. He laughed, a big booming sound. "Good? Kid, it's the best week I've had in months. Come by tomorrow and we'll talk." When I hung up, I sat still for a long time, the phone warm in my hand, and felt something I hadn't felt in forever. Proof. Real proof that maybe I wasn't just a dreamer after all. The next afternoon, the gym looked different to me, even though nothing had changed except my own hope. The owner, Mark, met me near the front desk, his usual tired eyes now bright. "You brought in 32 new sign-ups in 10 days, he said, holding up a sheet of paper like it was a trophy. "You know what that means, right?" I shrugged, trying to smother my grin. "That the ads are working?" He clapped me on the shoulder so hard I almost stumbled. "It means I'm paying you. Not just for this, either. I want you to handle all my marketing from now on." The number he offered wasn't huge, but to me it might as well have been a fortune. I shook his hand, my palms sweaty, my voice unsteady. "Thank you. I won't let you down," I said. On the bus ride home, pressed between strangers, I stared out the dirty window at the passing city, and for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a dark, empty hallway. It felt like a door I might actually be able to open. One client slowly turned into 3. Mark told a friend who owned a small bakery, and she called me after closing one night, her voice thick with flour dust exhaustion and quiet hope. "If you can get people in here on weekdays," she said, "I'll bake you a cake myself." I smiled into the phone and spent the next week visiting her shop, taking photos of warm loaves and frosting swirls while the smell of sugar and yeast clung to my clothes. I posted reels, wrote simple posts about her story, and made a campaign for morning coffee and pastry specials. Within a month, she sent me a picture of a line stretching out the door and a message that simply read, "You did this." I stared at it, my heart pounding, and sent back, "We did." Then her cousin, who owned a small salon, reached out. "I heard you're some kind of social media wizard," she joked. "Can you make people care about hair?" My calendar, once painfully empty, began to fill with names and meetings. It wasn't overnight magic, but it was motion. Real forward motion. 3 clients grew to 10, and 10 slowly shaped itself into a real company, even if it was still just me at my kitchen table with a cheap laptop and a shaky Wi-Fi signal. I gave it a name, Skyline Digital, after the city view I could barely see from my bedroom window if I leaned to the left. I built a simple website by watching tutorials until my eyes blurred, wrote my own About section, and laughed a little as I typed the word team, even though the team was just me and my overworked coffee maker. But my systems got better. I created templates, organized files, set up automatic reports. My days stopped feeling like random fights for survival and more like a plan, a long stairway I was patiently climbing. Some nights I still ate instant noodles, but the fear that I might not make rent started to loosen its grip. When my mom called now, her voice sounded lighter. "How are things going?" she asked one Sunday afternoon. I looked around at my messy apartment filled with notebooks, charts, and client folders. "Still small," I said honestly, "but growing. For real this time." As the years passed quietly, my life changed in slow, steady layers instead of loud jumps. I moved from the old third-floor apartment with appealing paint to a slightly better place with white walls, clean windows, and a desk that didn't wobble. Then, a year later, I signed a lease for a tiny office downtown, barely big enough for 2 desks and a plant that I kept forgetting to water. I hired my first assistant, a college student named Mia, who showed up with bright eyes and a notebook full of color-coded tabs. "It's just us for now," I told her on her first day, standing in front of the window that overlooked a busy street. but we're going somewhere." She smiled and said, "Good. I hate standing still." We didn't post about our wins, we were too busy trying to create them. While other people flashed their lives online, I stayed mostly invisible. No revenge posts. No fake flexing. No public drama. I worked in silence, letting every small victory stitch together the torn parts of my confidence. The world didn't know my name yet, but my clients did, and that was enough to keep me moving. Melissa slipped further into the background of my mind, like an old song I used to play on repeat but now only heard by accident. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of a red dress in a crowd or see a black Mercedes glide past and feel a brief, sharp pull of memory, but it faded faster each time. I stopped checking her social media completely, not out of discipline at first, but because I was simply too tired and too focused. My days were a blur of client calls, campaign planning, and problem solving, while my nights became less about survival and more about strategy. I learned to say no to the wrong clients, to raise my prices, to delegate small tasks to Mia, who turned out to be faster and smarter than I expected. "You know this could be big, right?" she said once as we sat in the small office after hours, pizza boxes on the table between us and ad results glowing on the screen. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. "I don't know about big," I said, but a quiet part of me whispered, maybe bigger than you ever thought. Then came the morning. Everything shifted, not slowly this time, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch on my life. I was in the office early, the sun barely up, its first light slipping between the buildings and landing in a soft stripe across my desk. I sipped my coffee and opened my email, expecting the usual mix of spam, client notes, and receipts. Instead, a subject line caught my eye: podcast interview request, 8-figure founders. My heart stumbled. I clicked it, half expecting it to be fake, some random marketing trick. But the email was detailed and personal. They wrote about how they had been following Skyline Digital's rise, how they loved our case studies and quiet approach, how they wanted to feature me on their popular entrepreneur show. "We'd love to have you share your story of failure, heartbreak, and rebuilding," the host had typed. "Your company crossing 8 figures in revenue is a milestone our audience would learn a lot from." I stared at the number, 8 figures, written so casually, and let out a slow, stunned breath. I had been too busy doing the work to stop and really feel what that meant until now. The podcast studio felt cooler than I expected when I walked in a week later, nerves buzzing under my skin like static. Soft lights glowed above a wooden table, 2 black microphones stood ready on adjustable arms, and the host, a smiling woman named Rachel, greeted me with a firm handshake. "Jason, thanks so much for coming," she said. "We've had so many listeners ask how you built this quiet giant of a company." I chuckled, rubbing the back of my neck. "Quiet is one word for it," I replied. "I just kept my head down and worked." We sat across from each other, headphones on, the mics close to our mouths. A red light flicked on above the door. Rachel gave a small nod. "We're live," she said gently. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to breathe slow and steady. I thought of the nights in that tiny kitchen, the unpaid bills, the instant noodles, the photos of Melissa's new life. I straightened up, ready to turn those memories into fuel, not chains. The conversation flowed more easily than I expected. Rachel asked about my early days, and I told her about sending 100 emails and hearing back from 2 people. I talked about building campaigns from a tiny table, learning from free videos because I couldn't afford anything else. "Did you ever think about quitting?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. I let out a breathy laugh. "Every day at first," I answered honestly. But there was this stubborn part of me that just wouldn't let go. I kept thinking, if I stop now, then all the pain I've gone through means nothing. She nodded, eyes focused, giving me space to keep going. I told her about Mark's gym, about the bakery, about the first time I hired someone and realized my dream had moved from my head into the real world. The more I talked, the more I felt that scared, younger version of myself sitting somewhere in the back of the room, watching, slowly forgiving me for not giving up on him. Then Rachel leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly, and asked the question that would change everything. "Jason," she said, glancing at her notes and then back at me, "was there ever someone who made you feel like you wouldn't become anything?" The room seemed to go quieter, the hum of the air conditioner fading into the background as my mind flashed instantly back to that tiny kitchen. I saw Melissa's crossed arms, the unpaid bills, the suitcase by the door. I felt that old sting rise up, but it no longer burned in the same way. Instead, it felt like a scar, tough, healed, still there but no longer open. I let a small smile touch my lips and took a breath. "Yeah," I said calmly, my voice steady. "There was someone I loved who once told me I'd never succeed. She said dreams don't pay rent, and that I would never get where I wanted to go. Rachel's eyebrows lifted slightly. How did that affect you? She asked. I thought for a second, then answered from the deepest part of myself. Honestly, that pain probably built this company. When the interview ended, Rachel thanked me again and a small production team clapped quietly as they took off their headphones. That last answer, one of them said, shaking his head, people are going to feel that. I laughed it off, still half running on adrenaline. We'll see, I replied, not fully understanding what was about to happen. They told me the episode would go live in a few days and walked me out past shelves of camera gear and sound equipment. Outside, the city was bright and loud, horns honking, people rushing by with coffee cups and backpacks. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the sun hit my face, the weight of the day settling into my bones. Then I went back to the office and dove into work, answering emails, reviewing reports, and joining team calls like it was any other day. By the time the episode aired, I almost forgot which stories I had told. I had no idea that my life was quietly shifting on millions of screens, that the version of me sitting in that cool studio would reach far more people than I'd ever met. The first sign came as a soft buzz on my phone during a late morning meeting. Then another. Then 10 more in less than a minute. Mia glanced at me over her laptop, eyebrows raised. You're popular today, she joked. I checked my notifications under the table and saw a flood of new follower alerts, message requests, and tags. Clips from the podcast were already spreading, short videos with bold captions like, "He turned heartbreak into an 8-figure empire, and this is what quiet revenge looks like." My heart sped up as I tapped one open. It was the moment Rachel asked if someone had ever made me feel like I wouldn't become anything. The comments were already piling up. I felt that. Crying in my car right now. Never letting anyone talk to me like that again. Another clip showed my line, "Honestly, that pain probably built this company." Underneath, people wrote, "This hit me in the soul," and "This man just turned heartbreak into rocket fuel." My name, my voice, my face were moving through TikTok, YouTube, Instagram all at once, like a wave I hadn't seen coming. By the end of that week, my interview had exploded in ways I couldn't have imagined. The full episode climbed into the podcast's top charts, while short clips of me talking about failure and rebuilding from nothing hit millions of views across different platforms. Reporters emailed asking for quotes. Small business owners messaged saying my story stopped them from shutting their doors. Strangers sent long paragraphs about breakups, layoffs, and all the times they were told they'd never be enough. I tried to answer as many as I could, typing late into the night. "Thank you for sharing this," I wrote again and again. "Keep going. Your story isn't over." One evening, Mia knocked on my office door holding her phone, eyes wide. "You need to see this," she said. On the screen was a stitched video, my clip playing on one side and on the other people reacting, crying, nodding, pointing at the words on the screen. "You're everywhere," she whispered. I sat back, a strange numbness mixed with gratitude washing over me. Somewhere deep inside, the younger version of me who ate noodles alone in the dark leaned forward, finally believing that all of it had meant something. And then, of course, there was Melissa. I didn't see the exact moment she watched the interview, but I felt the echo of it a few days later when a message from a familiar number lit up my phone. It was late, the office was empty except for me, and the city outside sparkled in the dark through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I was reviewing a campaign report when my phone buzzed on the desk. Absent-mindedly, I reached for it, and froze when I saw her name on the screen. My heart thudded once, hard like it was knocking on my ribs. For a second, everything around me blurred. The soft hum of the air conditioner, the glow of the computer screen, the faint beeping of someone locking their car on the street below. I opened the message with a thumb that suddenly didn't feel steady. "Hey, I saw your interview. I'm really proud of you. Maybe we could catch up sometime." The words sat there, simple and polite, but behind them I could almost hear that old voice, the one that once told me I'd never succeed. Only now it sounded different, uncertain, almost small. I leaned back slowly in my black office chair, the leather creaking softly, and let my eyes drift away from the screen. Outside, the city skyline stretched in front of me like a living painting. Tall buildings lit up against the night, cars flowing like quiet rivers of light below. This was a world Melissa had once chased in someone else's passenger seat, dressed in red and framed by a Mercedes door. Now I sat above it, in an office with my company's name on the door, built from every doubt and every long night she had never seen. I thought about her life since she left, about the fraud scandal I'd heard whispers of, the photos disappearing from her profile, the quiet gap where the flashy man in his black car used to be. I imagined her sitting in a small apartment somewhere, holding her phone, watching millions of strangers call me inspiring while criticizing, the kind of person who abandons someone at their lowest point. Years ago, if she had texted, I would have answered in seconds, probably with shaky hands and too many words. Now I just watch the message glow softly in the dark office, no rush, no panic, no anger, only a quiet, deep calm. I read her message one more time, slowly, letting each word pass through me like water through open fingers. I'm really proud of you. The younger me would have grabbed onto that line like a lifeboat, desperate for validation from the person who once made him feel so small. Maybe we could catch up sometime? Another version of me, the one who still checked her profile late at night, would have jumped at this chance, already picturing some reunion scene, some perfect moment where she would apologize and I would forgive her and everything would feel neatly closed. But the man sitting in that office, looking out at the city he had quietly climbed toward, was not that boy anymore. I realized something simple and powerful. I didn't need anything from her. Not her apology. Not her praise. Not even her regret. My story had already moved past the chapter where she was the main character. I pressed the power button on my phone and watched the screen go black, the message disappearing into the dark. Then I leaned back further in my chair, hands behind my head, and let a small, honest smile spread across my face, feeling no urge at all to look back.